Welcome to this explainer. Let's dive straight into the technical reality behind the absolute behemoth that is Grand Theft Auto 6. You've seen the hype, right? And you've definitely seen the endless internet debates about frame rates, resolution, and whether our current consoles can actually handle it. Well, today, we're cutting through all that noise. We're going straight to the source material to find out exactly why this monumental game is targeting 30 frames per second on modern hardware, and what that actually means for us when we finally get our hands on it. Okay, here's the game plan for today. We're covering 1. The 30 FPS reality, 2. The 60 FPS debate, 3. The CPU bottleneck explained, 4. Resolution and the PS5 Pro, and finally, 5. Fidelity versus frame rate. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The 30 FPS reality and our baseline performance.
So here is the bedrock fact we need to start with. Rockstar North Coast studio head Rob Nelson recently confirmed in interviews around the extended look presentation that the game is indeed running at 30 frames per second right now in development. This is huge. It's not some last-minute band-aid or a late-stage compromise. A 30 FPS target is the deliberate, calculated baseline they're building this entire world around. Now, as for whether a 60 FPS mode could happen at launch or maybe down the road, well, Nelson left that door slightly ajar, deferring to his technical team.
And that 30 FPS target, it's tied directly to a seriously ambitious visual baseline. The tech wizards over at Digital Foundry did a massive frame-by-frame dive into the extended look footage, and their analysis points to a native 1440p internal rendering resolution on the base PlayStation 5. Guys, for a game of this unprecedented massive scope running on console hardware that's already several years old, hitting 1440p natively is incredibly impressive.
Digging a bit deeper into Digital Foundry's analysis, the footage shows a relatively stable 30 FPS output with just the very occasional single-frame drop. Interestingly, they didn't spot any of the usual modern upscaling tricks like FSR2 to create a super sharp image. Instead, the game is using spatial upscaling to hit that 4K output. Now, that does introduce a little bit of softness to the really fine details, but throw in heavy, complex ray-traced elements like reflections and global illumination, which look amazing even if slightly noisy in static shots, and it all points to one thing. This game is pushing the PS5 to its absolute physical limits.
Section 2. The 60 FPS debate and player expectations.
Okay, so this is where a lot of the confusion happens. People look at the PS5 box, they see 4K and 120Hz via HDMI 2.1, and wonder if shooters and racing games can do it, why can't GTA 6? Well, it comes down to the massive gulf between what the raw hardware can technically output to your TV and what the game's engine can actually simulate. That HDMI 2.1 port gives you the pipe for high frame rates, sure, but the developer's engine has to actually generate those frames first. And for GTA 6, native 4K at 120 or even 60 FPS just doesn't align with what they're trying to achieve under the hood.
But man, the rumors just won't quit, will they? European retailers like MediaMarkt have posted listings mentioning quality and performance modes. There's even a Polish podcast called Rock and Boris claiming an inside source at Rockstar is desperately fighting to optimize a 60 FPS mode, maybe even for a post-launch patch if they run out of time. But look, the technical experts are pouring cold water on this. Pushing a true 60 FPS on base hardware for a day one launch, it's viewed as highly improbable without stripping the game's meticulously crafted design down to the bone.
Section 3. The CPU bottleneck and world simulation.
To really understand why 60 FPS is such a mountain to climb, we have to look at how a game is actually rendered. It's basically a two-part job. Your GPU is the artist. It's drawing the beautiful lighting, the complex materials, the geometry, the ray tracing, but your CPU, that's the brain. The CPU is calculating the insanely dense city traffic, the complex AI of the NPCs, and the chaotic physics of that massive 10-car pileup you just caused on the highway. In a Rockstar game, the world isn't just a static painting. It's a living, breathing, heavily simulated ecosystem.
And that brings us to why experts are so skeptical, calling a 60 FPS mode a bridge too far. The primary hurdle here isn't just making it look pretty, it's an enormous CPU bottleneck. You literally can't just lower the graphics to fix a CPU problem created by world simulation. To hit a locked 60 FPS, the console has exactly 16.7 milliseconds to calculate everything, graphics, physics, AI, for the very next frame. Trying to fit this insanely dense environment into that tiny split-second window would require brutally cutting the exact things that make the game feel truly next-gen.
Section 4. Resolution and the PS5 Pro.
So what about the upcoming hardware upgrade? Enter the PS5 Pro, which is going to introduce something called PSSR, or PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. This is a really big deal. It's an advanced, machine learning upscaler that could help the game look significantly cleaner and closer to a true 4K presentation than the base console. Where the standard PS5 uses that basic spatial upscaling we talked about, PSSR should clean up the shimmer and aliasing beautifully.
But here is the million-dollar question. Will the Pro get us to 60 FPS? If we look at the Pro's internal upgrades, it's a stark contrast. Yes, it gives us a highly meaningful GPU uplift and massively improved ray tracing acceleration. That's awesome for visuals. But the CPU reality? It's basically the exact same Zen 2 architecture as the base PS5, just with a fractionally faster clock speed. Since we just established that the CPU is the main bottleneck holding everything back, the core limit hasn't really changed.
Because of that lingering CPU limit, the experts are pointing to a really interesting middle ground for the PS5 Pro, a 40 frames per second compromise mode. If you've got a 120Hz TV, 40 FPS is kind of magic. It hits a perfect 25 millisecond frame time, meaning it feels significantly smoother and much more responsive than 30 FPS, but crucially, it doesn't demand the impossible processing budget of a full 60.
Section 5. Fidelity over frame rate. Let's just zoom out for a second and look at Rockstar's design philosophy. Prioritizing jaw-dropping visual and simulation fidelity at a locked 30 FPS is actually a long-standing tradition for them. Look at this timeline. GTA V, the original release of GTA 5, and Red Dead Redemption 2. They all launched targeting 30 FPS. They have always chosen world density, lighting, and systemic depth over high frame rates. Pushing the visual boundaries of a console generation is literally baked into their DNA.
There's a brilliant quote from a former Rockstar technical lead that puts the math into perfect perspective for us. He said, at 30 FPS, a game can render roughly twice as many polygons as at 60 FPS. It is literally that simple. By having the frame rate, they buy themselves the headroom to pack the world with double the visual detail. We all love the buttery smoothness of 60 frames per second, but for the development team, their priority is making sure this open world is the most dense, immersive space you've ever stepped into.
And that leaves us with a truly provocative technical trade-off as we count down the days to launch. We know the limits of the hardware, and we know the heavy tax that a genuinely alive, simulated city demands. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. In the ultimate open-world experience, would you really sacrifice staggering visual density and a realistic breathing simulation just to get hyper-smooth 60 FPS responsiveness? Is it worth the trade? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.